Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of a man.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is year 0. Today, I have my good friend Brad Carl on the show. Brad and I sat down to talk about his year of discovering anarcho-capitalism, specifically Rothbard, Tom Woods, and other podcasts that he enjoys to listen to, and how he went from apolitical, just a basic normie, to a radical in the sense of government standards, a 40-year-old anarchist, you might say. So I thought it would be an interesting conversation. He asked me some questions, I asked him some questions, and we just have a generally good conversation. But first, RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great libertarian and a great anarcho-capitalist. He's also a great graphic designer. He designed my podcast logo and Pete Quinones' podcast logo for Free Man Beyond the Wall. I know he's been busy with other work as well, so you can probably go to his website, RyanBunting.com, and see an accumulation of what he's designed. And also check out his book. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy the show. Yes, it is. Thank you, Fed. I appreciate that. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Brad Carl, who you've heard on the show a couple of times before. What's going on, dude?
Hey, man. I'm doing good, Tommy. Thanks for having me again.
No, this is my pleasure. You know, the last time you and I recorded, it didn't record the whole conversation, so I didn't release it. It was like he got like the first 10 minutes, and then there was like a 10-minute gap, and then it got 30 more minutes, and then there was like a 10-minute gap, and then it got like 10 more minutes, and I was like, I'm not even trying to piece this shit together. So,
yeah, I remember that. I was thinking when we were scheduling this one about that time, and if I recall correctly, we were drinking craft beer and talking mostly about it. Wasn't that true?
Yes, it was a beer podcast. That's true.
Yes.
And I had another podcast scheduled for that day, and I was so fucked up by the time I got to that podcast. So,
It happened.
Yeah. Well, not only was I recording an episode on craft beer, I was also on vacation. So I'd been sitting out by the pond since 7 o'clock in the morning, drinking beer and fishing all day. So yeah, so I was trashed by the time that second podcast came around that I was supposed to record, and I was just like, all right, whatever. But I was actually able to release that one. I just, for some reason, the one you and I recorded, it did not come through. So yeah, it's like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, well, it'll be lost in space forever, but we'll hold that memory in our hearts. We know we had a good time. We just don't have anything to remember it by in our own minds. Yeah.
Can't quite grasp why it was so much fun, but it might have had something to do with all the beer.
Right.
So you and I've been messaging, and I'm not going to say you are now in the present, but you have always been pretty apolitical. Is that fair? Like, you really just didn't give a fuck.
Yeah, I would say that is, if you were to ask me that question 3 years ago, I probably would have had a non-answer, which would probably classify me or label me as apolitical. Yeah.
Yeah. But since COVID, you've stumbled into kind of the political realm, partially because of me and me sending you videos and introducing you to different people. to listen to, but almost by necessity in some ways. So, like, talk us through this last year, what's been going on with Brad, and how you've been dealing with the lockdowns, with COVID, and all that.
Yeah, that's that's a perfect way to tell you more about it. And I will say this from the start, and I'm sure you've heard this from many people, and I will admit that I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But when I first heard about COVID, and I'm not trying to say I'm a rock star for this, but being apolitical for the most part and not really paying attention to what was going on in the country for the most part before then, when I heard about COVID, I immediately said, something's fucking wrong here. Right away, I was like, and I just knew it's like, something's not, this isn't sounding right. This is not, and I immediately started, like, in the back of my mind, I think, this is not The Walking Dead. Okay. We're not all turning to zombies, but that's the way it was sounding, and so it would just seem so dramatic and so out of the realm of believability. So that immediately, I immediately put myself onto that side of it, I think, but I will admit that I think a lot of people would also agree that I was still cautious early on. I'm like, okay, look, I've got a daughter, I've got a family, I've got, a mother and a mother-in-law that are close to 80. It's like, all right, I'll do my part, fine, I'll wear a freaking mask for a while. I'll do this, I'll do that. I just started a new job. And I'm a salesman for the day job. And it was a job with a lot of traveling. So there was a lot of issue with that, as well as companies started to CYA left and right. They shut down, basically not shutting their business down, because I actually deal with a lot of essential businesses, I guess you could say. So they were still open, but they weren't letting any people in. Right. So, and those that were letting you in, had all the protocols and the temperature taking and the signing your life away and wearing a mask. And it really just, the longer it went on and the more, of course, I originally was watching national news, and the inconsistencies were mind-boggling in the first few months. Whether you're talking about Fauci flipping his own script, whether you talk about Trump not really knowing what he really wanted to do or how he wanted to handle it, because in the back of his mind, I'm sure he's thinking, well, I want to get reelected. And so I assume he did. I don't know. But just so much weird shit going on. And then I realized that, thanks to you, Tommy, that there were other ways. There was other places to go and get the information that I knew had to be out there, but I just wasn't seeing it on the national media websites or on TV. And so it was around that time that you introduced me to some people. If I'm not mistaken, I think Tom Wood's video that was one of the first ones that was taken down by YouTube I think that was the one that you sent me. Yeah. I think. Does that sound right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that turned me on to him, and that really got me going. It's like, oh God, there are other people. It made me realize I was not crazy. But my family was quite pro mask, pro, be careful, pro, we're all going to die. And so I was the one guy going, yeah, but I felt like on an island. So that really helped me when you and I connected in that way, to know that I wasn't going crazy here in middle America.
Yeah, no, I saw you questioning the narrative, and I'm always good for, healthy skepticism, like right. There's a certain amount of skepticism you should always have if the government is, I think it's Scott Horton, the founder of the Libertarian Institute, where I publish my podcast. He has a saying that if the Democrats and Republicans are agreeing on something, it's probably the worst thing for the country. And so like, whenever I see people being skeptical, and the Democrats and Republicans are agreeing, I'm like, well, the skepticism is warranted. Like, you're doing the right thing. I'm not saying you have all the information. I'm not saying you know for sure, but you should always be skeptical when the two parties are agreeing on something. So whenever I saw you being skeptical, which I was, I wasn't super active on Twitter, not near as active on Twitter as I am right now until the beginning of this year. And so I would only see like you tweet something out every couple of months. And so by the time I got to you and it was like, hey, like, yeah, Tom Woods is doing videos on this, or Jason Staple. I think I sent you some Jason Stapleton too. And I was like, these guys are talking about this stuff. So like, this is stuff that you'd be interested in looking at. And, you know, the people that just fall in line are the ones I question. Like, if you're questioning the narrative, I'm usually like, kind of like, oh, okay, like, you're good. But anybody who just falls in line without question, I wonder, who is this person? What are they all about? You know, like
Yeah.
do they even think about these things? Does any doubt creep into their mind ever for any reason? So, and I noticed a lot of the same things you did. Being a trucker, being over the road, it was like I would go to pick up a load and I would have to have my temperature taken, or I would go to pick up a load and I would have to sign some document saying I hadn't been in contact with some person that's been to one of like 5 countries or something like that. Like weird stuff. And I was just like, okay, like this, whatever, I'll sign it. I'll do what you need me to do, because I just want to get out of here. I make my money by driving, not by sitting here arguing with you. So,
Right.
you know, so did you notice with sales? Because I have a few friends that are in sales, and they told me the weirdest thing about sales over the last year was that they were considered essential, but nobody that was supposed to be their clients, nobody that they were selling to was essential. So they had no commission coming in.
Wow. No, I was lucky enough not to have that particular issue, but I can see where that could be an issue. And I was really lucky, especially in 2020 through that. I mean, we did not get to travel very much because of it, but we were still able to make money, and things were a little slow, though, I will say. And of course, that never stops sales management and sales directors. You need to sell more. You need to sell more. It's like, what the frick do you want me to do? You know,
Right.
it's like, because even with the business that I'm in, that is essential. I'll just say it's for animals and food and things like that. Is that they hunkered down, like they were not going to spend a bunch of extra money. I mean, because again, with all the hype that was going on in this country, nobody knew what was going to happen. You know, of course, we were lucky in Middle America here, I'm in Kansas City. You know, we weren't as shut down as, say, you know, California or New York or something like that. But nobody knew what was going to happen, and so they were careful with the money. Large companies and small companies both, and so I can totally see where some of your sales friends ran into some difficult situations. And I want to tag on to something else that you said here a minute ago that I totally agree with. When you were talking about how you saw, you know, or heard people falling in line on this thing, and you immediately thought to yourself, who is this person and why? And what are you thinking? And I'll tell you, if I learned anything in the last year and a half, it was that I finally had proof, I guess I should say. Like I walk around the world, Tommy, and I pretend like everybody thinks like I think. And it's amazing that I do that and am able to survive. But I think that comes with the territory of, you know, sales being your main occupation. You can't overanalyze. You can only analyze what you hear and what you see, and you can only guess on the other stuff. So if you go out there and try to overanalyze, you're never going to succeed. But this whole thing made me realize, holy crap, there are a lot of people out there that think nothing like I do. And some of them I'm related to or may have married at one time. And it's mind boggling that you think you know a person, maybe, and you're like, you what? It's like, and I have a theory. And I'd like to hear your comments on this. When you start to think and wonder about who these people are that are still at this point so scared to death, that they're still so pro-mask, they're still pissed off at anybody who doesn't have the vaccine, even though the CDC themselves has admitted that even if you're vaccinated, you're spreading this thing. So it really doesn't matter who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated. You want to wear a mask, wear a mask. You don't want to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. But of course, they mandated all this stuff. So if you're not doing what they say, these people are freaked out. I have a theory that a lot of these people have had some sudden death situations happen in their life, whether it be a relative or something like that. I'm not saying all of them, but I know a handful of them that maybe had, a father die suddenly of a heart attack, or somebody get run over by a bus, or somebody had something happen to them that they knew or that they were close to. And so this whole COVID thing, with all the magnification that's been going on, has them just mentally screwed up. I mean, do you think there's something to that?
There could be. I don't know about that. Kind of the way I look at it is most people are looking for a tribe. They're trying to fit into something.
Oh, yeah.
And they're trying to, humans are tribal. And and so I think what you're experiencing is they have found a way to fit in. And so they maybe have low self-esteem in some other facets of their life. And this is a way for them to feel powerful and to feel like they're on top of the world. And that they fit in with the community that maybe they've never felt like they fit in with before. And because I'm looking a lot at this idea that Robert Higgs put forward on ideology, and it's only one chapter of his book, Crisis in Leviathan, but I'm reading over it again and again, trying to put together these pieces that he's laying out there for ideology. And what he says is ideology is cognitive, aka reason, affective with an A, therefore emotion, programmatic, which is programming, and solidary, which makes it communal. Pardon the dogs. He thinks something's attacking us. And so that solidary would be communal. Boogie. So he's laying this out like these are the four tendencies of ideology, and I'm looking at these tendencies, and I'm like, okay, so mass media consumption, we have programming, cognitive, you have reason. So like, what are they thinking? Well, the scientists are saying such and such. So now your reason is covered. You have affective, feeling. You should be in fear because the scientists say that you should be in fear and everyone's going to die. So you have your feeling covered. So how do you fit into the community? How do you find that solidarity? And the way to find it is to fall in line with all the Karens, to wear the mask, to shame people that don't want to wear the mask, to take the vaccine, to shame people that don't take the vaccine. And you ignore everything that goes against what your beliefs are because you found your community that you want to fit into, right? And so Robert Higgs makes a point of saying it doesn't matter if on factual basis you can show these people that they're wrong. Their tendency to move in these directions have nothing to do with fact or objectivity. It has to do with a survival instinct. And so it is more rational for them to ignore reason that disputes their claims than it and be part of the community and survive than it is for them to accept things outside the mainstream narrative and to be ostracized.
Yeah, I do totally agree with when you mentioned tribalism, that is obviously the one thing that's come up quite a bit on my podcast listenings and readings that I have done. And I do totally agree with what you're saying there. And I guess my question then to follow up with that is, how does that fall into the political spectrum? Because, or how does COVID and what you just described in this particular situation fall in the political spectrum of where, if you were to ask me today, well, what is it? Well, Republicans and most Republicans and libertarians are pro do whatever the hell you want to do for yourself, and of course the Democrats, the liberals, they're all the mask supremacists and everything else. Does that happen if Trump is president right now? I'm sure you've discussed this and thought about this, and I've asked this question before to other people. Are we really in the same spot? Because there's obviously footage of, the vice president and the president now.
Yeah,
Biden and
Kamala
saying, stuff. Yeah.
Kamala
Right.
said that she wouldn't take the Trump vaccine until it was
Right.
tested properly. Yeah, and that's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't think it would. Yeah, actually, okay. No, I'm trying to process how the timeline of how these things happened, and so yes, it would have happened, and the reason it would have happened is because we live post Enlightenment. So the progressive idea is that you can use science and rationalization to create and to engineer society, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, this was tried in the 20th century, and you ended up with fascism and communism, which killed hundreds of millions of people. But they still believe that if done properly, you can rationally engineer utilizing science to shape society. So I think it would have looked a lot like the last few months of Trump, where they were preaching Fauci is the best and Trump doesn't know what he's talking about, even on the occasions that he was repeating what Fauci said 2 days before. Mm-hmm. And because they're caught up, like I said, ideology and being part of a community, the rational side of that is not being right. It is being correct on the talking points, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter if they're contradicting themselves. And I've seen this. I've seen people contradict themselves within 5 minutes and not even blink, even if you point out to them, hey, dude, you just contradicted yourself. It doesn't make sense. How do you believe this and this at the same time? So, you ask somebody who is pro-life, right? Who's against abortion, why they are so pro-war at the same time. So you're not pro-life, right? But they'll argue with you till the day they fucking die, right? So the cognitive dissonance comes in from the attachment to the community, from being part of that community. So that, like I said, Robert Higgs said, the rational person will actually take on the irrational stance because that keeps them embedded within society and not ostracized. So you got to look at it from an evolutionary biology standpoint when you're looking at that. It's not about being correct or factual objectively. It's about being correct or factual ideologically.
Right.
Yeah. So
Well, that makes
so they don't really care if they contradict themselves, right? They care that they are spewing the proper talking points in order to virtue signal to those that think the way they do.
Yeah, that's great. And it's funny because I saw that a lot on Twitter. And in fact, I just told you a few days ago that I'm taking a break because I just got to a point where I just couldn't take it anymore because everything I read I had to comment, or I had to try to physically force myself not to comment. And I had one guy that was adamant about masks when the mask thing started coming back around to, oh, masks work. It's proven that masks work. And I'm like, well, I can prove that they don't. And, and it doesn't matter. This guy sends me like 5 different links in my Twitter feed. And they were all, of course, published and written like post coronavirus. Okay. So that right there tells me all I need to know.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I mean, it's like, and so, like you said, they're doing their job by just throwing stuff at me. And all it really is it's nonsense. I mean, anyway, my point is I have been experiencing a lot of exactly what you're talking about. And I should also mention real quick, I think you'll appreciate this. I got accused in my family from 2016 till, say, coronavirus started and Trump was ousted from office. My 13-year-old daughter and wife at the time both basically accused me of being a Trump lover. And the thing is that I never, ever said that. What I used to laugh at, how much they hated him. Every time he, of course, came on, and every, of course, day the TV would, what did Trump say today? And what's he tweeting? And oh, he's such a dumbass and blah, 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 blah. And, they're grumbling. And heck, my daughter, let's see, she would have been only like 9 when he went into office. So what does she know, right? She just knows the guy. Mom doesn't like the guy, or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And literally, I think to this day, my daughter still thinks that I was a Trump guy. And I'm like, no, I never was a Trump guy. I laughed at you guys because you never talked about his politics. You never talked about his policies. All you talked about was how much of a jerk he was. Yeah. And that, to me, is not political at all. It doesn't. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
No, exactly. So honestly, I think it's ironic that it took somebody like Trump to get me to see how apolitical I really am.
Yeah. It is funny because I brought it up to a friend of mine, similar situation. And I brought it up to him and I said, he said, Trump is the worst president we've ever had. I was like, are you sure of that? He's like, he goes, he's definitely the most crude and obnoxious president we've ever had. I'm like, are you sure of that? And he goes, yes, without a doubt. I said, okay, what do you think about the Great Society? And he was like, oh yeah. Like, I think like Johnson's view of the Great Society was an ideal view. I was like, do you realize that he used to hold press conferences while he was taking a shit on the toilet to embarrass the media because he hated them so much? Do you realize that he used to run around the Oval Office and just whip his dick out because it was so huge and it made everybody like blush? Like he was crude as fuck. Like, this dude was not a gentleman by any stretch of the imagination. And you're telling me that Trump, is like just as bad. No, he just says things in public you don't think are presidential. He's not horrible. Like, in the way that Trump was able to break the brains of liberals was hilarious. I laughed constantly when people they would have meltdowns over the smallest shit. Like when he's like said shithole countries. I laughed because I'm like, if your dad or brother would have said that, you would have thought nothing of it. Because it's a president, you think that he's above thinking in that language or that platform. You're fucking ridiculous. Do you not understand? We all put our pants on one leg at a time, right? And so this is the liberal problem. This is the problem that liberalism and progressivism will never get past. Their ideal is to create utopia. In order to have utopia, they envision the executive as Christ. And anybody who acts in any way less sophisticated than they imagine Christ, they like shit themselves over, right?
Yeah.
Like remember with George Bush, he couldn't complete a sentence without fumbling over a word because he was a freaking redneck, you know? Like, and they used to say all the same shit about him. And then when Trump was in office, they were like, "Oh, don't you miss the days of George Bush?" Yeah, I do, because at least we could all laugh together, right? Because you know, like because we were all aware that it was fucking funny. Like we were all aware that it was funny. Like Trump broke these people.
So much of the focus of my podcast is to point out abuses of power and how bad things have gotten and the direction in which we're heading as a society. And it can be a real black pill. I've partnered up with Richard Grove to offer my listeners an opportunity to sign up to his Autonomy Course. The Autonomy Course is designed for people looking for solutions, people that want to shape their own future, people that are not willing to be at the behest of large corporations or the United States government or the banking system. The Autonomy Course is designed for those of you who wish to have complete control of the reins of your life, who are looking to be successful, to thrive and not just survive, to provide for your family by utilizing your existing skills and learning how to market and sell those skills in order to be your own boss, or learn new skills in order to leverage that into a new career opportunity. So if there's a job out there you've been trying to get or you've been wishing you could get, but you just don't have the skills for it, the Autonomy Course is the place for you to start, to learn how to land that position, to learn how to market yourself better, to gain confidence, and to be surrounded by a community of like-minded people that will encourage you and help you along the way. So use my affiliate links and go check out the Autonomy Course. It could be right for you.
Oh yeah, he definitely did. And I will tell you, like I said, the thing that when you throw COVID into the mix for me is that I started to realize what a politician is supposed to be versus, or a government official, I'll say, what a government official is supposed to be versus what they were doing and how they're acting and how they're still acting. You know, these mandates, it's like, whoever said that, in fact, I think I read one of the last tweets I read before I said, I got to shut this shit down, was somebody saying something, and they called the government official, basically said that they're trying to, I don't know, just the way they worded it was just annoying. It's like, no, they're a public servant. They're not not my doctor. They're not there to tell me what I should do. They're there to serve us. But all they really do is rob us of our money. You know, I told my 13-year-old daughter, who unfortunately I think she's on her road to being a liberal or a progressive if I don't stop it soon. I told her, I said, you wait till you get your first job. I said, you give me a call when you get your first paycheck. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, when you think you're going to make this much and you find out how much you've really made, then you'll understand what I'm talking about, you know? And so the reason I bring that up, Tommy, is that I have totally begun to understand, especially through the people that you've introduced me to, like Jason Stapleton and Tom Woods, and yourself, of course. The theories of libertarianism and less government, less taxes, more liberty, and things of that nature. And I don't like labels necessarily, especially not these days with what's been going on with the coronavirus. But I really appreciate those particular the angle, I should say, of libertarianism. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, libertarianism has its problems, and a lot of us have been nitpicking at its heels. But the thing is, the reason we're nitpicking at the heels of libertarianism is because we're trying to find a solution for the fucking authoritarianism that we're dealing with.
Right.
And it's like, okay, this is not a sufficient tool to fight what it is we're fighting. So what can we do to fight it sufficiently? The principles, the philosophy, it's all great. But the majority of people are like your wife, your ex-wife, or your daughter, and they don't, they're not attracted to these principles. H.L. Mencken had said once that people are don't want liberty, they want security, right? So how do libertarians offer the message of liberty while packaging it as security, right? It's like,
right.
Okay, like, because like really what we're trying to do, like really what the idea of libertarianism is, really what libertarians want to do is secure you against the authority of the state, the monopoly on violence. We want to stop this monopoly from being able to come down and squash you,
Right.
And so we want to stop the Wacos. We want to stop the Ruby Ridges, right? So that's kind of like but it's a higher goal, like to look at it that way. Most people aren't worried about being Wacoed or Ruby Ridged, right? Most people are just going through their day to day, and they're more worried about the thug on the corner, the street corner, possibly robbing them. Most people are worried about, getting ripped off in a pyramid scheme or something like that. They're much less worried about what the state is doing. So how do you incorporate this language and tell the story in such a way that makes people aware that the state is what the state is? And I sent you, I don't know if you were able to listen to it, but I sent you the audiobook, Murray Rothbard's Anatomy of the State, right?
Yep.
Like, when you listen to that the first time, you're like, I was never taught that that's what government was. Like that's not what government is, as far as I recognize. Like, that's not what I was taught it is. And see, so you're going through 15,000 hours of public education, and they're telling you that this is a government education program educating you the way the government wants you educated, right? In order to create good little citizens. And so we're fighting not only $1 trillion a year propaganda, machine, but we're also fighting thousands of hours of propaganda, like pumped into the heads of children from a very early age. And so the cognitive dissonance is not abnormal. And this is why I was telling you earlier, that Robert Higgs, paragraph where he talks about how the rational man will act in such a way that he is to be included in society. Like, that's an evolutionary thing. Like, people do not want to be ostracized. They don't want to be thrown out into the wilderness on their own. That's not normal. You don't want that, because that's where you die, right? You want to be part of this society because that's where security is. So you have to realize that this is exactly the same thing H.L. Mencken was saying. They don't want liberty because that's the wilderness. They don't know what freedom is. They don't know what liberty is. They want security. So how do you package an ideology based around liberty in such a way that shows that it's secure And what is it secure against? Is it secure against what people recognize as the threat, or is it secure against what took you
Actual threat.
10,000
Right.
hours to read and devour and learn is a threat? How do you attach the state to the enemy that the average person sees? That's what libertarians always miss. They can't figure out how to do it because there is no way to do it. The only way to recognize the threat that is the state takes thousands of hours of research. And then you're like, fuck, I got to do something about this. And and you want to tell everybody, but nobody wants to hear it because they haven't done all that research and they don't understand what the hell you're saying.
Yeah, no, that's a great description of it, and it's helpful to hear that, because what it really reminds me of is being a salesman. Any salesman will tell you that every customer wants quality, price, and service. They want the best out of all three, and every business claims to have all three of those things. But you know what? They're always deficient at least one of them, and sometimes two of them, and they're really only good at one of them. You really can't be good at all three 99.9% of the time, but you try to present yourself that way. So it kind of reminds me exactly of what you're talking about here, of trying to do, two very difficult things at one time. But I will say too, when you talk about the cognitive dissonance that's going on out there, that became my go-to line the last couple of days on Twitter. Everything I was reading, I was just like, you could see, hear, and feel the cognitive dissonance in all these tweets that are coming out of the pro-maskers and, all this stuff. It made me want to vomit. I'm like, God, people, if you could, I think one person I even said, do you even read before you tweet? Do you even read what you're saying? They just don't. They just vomit. It's like they're vomiting the narrative. It's so crazy. And I could go on all day about it, but I will say this too, real quick. Another one that I'm sorry to keep pimping other podcasts, but somebody else that I've discovered, and I think you're familiar with too, is Eric July. And he said something recently that I just love, and I'm sure you'll agree with it. He said Republicans campaign like libertarians and govern like Democrats. And when he said that, it really started to make sense, right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's crazy.
No, it makes total sense. And there is a push in the Republican Party, at least on a local level, with people like Tho Bishop and some of these guys that are trying to pull away from the Libertarian Party and move into the Republican Party and kind of take it over. Now, I know my dad had told me a couple of years ago that he listens to Andrew Wilkow. I don't know the guy, so I know some of my friends like him, like my boy Quincy. He really likes Andrew Wilkow. And one of the things he says is the future of the Republican Party is libertarian. So we may be looking at a shift to where a lot of libertarians flood into the Republican Party and start taking over state politics in this way. I don't know about national politics. National politics is a whole different ballgame.
Right.
But there are people that are intent on gripping onto the Libertarian Party as well and utilizing the Libertarian Party as a third party to, I don't know, to take over politics on local levels from a third party standpoint. So you have this really interesting dynamic within libertarianism and the arguments they're having, trying to figure out, because to be fair, not one of these people are happy with the regime we live under. None of them are happy with the way things are going. They're all trying to figure it out, right? Everybody is weighing and, different ideas and taking it in and trying to figure out, how do you defeat this? And I don't know if there's a single way to do it. I'm kind of one of those guys that throw mud against the wall and see what sticks. I'm like, do it all, you know, let 1,000 flowers bloom and see what happens, you know, because I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know, you know, how to dismantle this Leviathan that we're facing. So, and how to stop it from becoming the totalitarians of old, which is really what the goal is. You don't want it to become this murderous Soviet regime or Nazi regime or whatever, where it's killing its own citizens. I mean, it's bad enough. It's imperial and going overseas and murdering shit tons of people overseas. You don't want it to turn around and start doing that to its own citizens. So I don't know the right way to attack that monster. And so I'm kind of one of those people like, let 1,000 flowers bloom, see what happens. Because all these people in reality, if they would stop arguing amongst themselves, are working in conjunction with each other. And they're all working towards very similar, if not the exact same goals.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think there's a very definitive enemy at the moment that targets should be aimed at. And I don't think it's other people that are liberty minded.
Right.
Whatever your conception of liberty may be, like I'm not interested in fighting with you. I have no time for that. I have more important things to do. So I really don't find myself getting involved in that situation so much. But I mean, I think everybody kind of has their own role here, and we're all playing out like different roles in different ways. And I don't know how we're going to stop this. I mean, because like you're looking at a situation that is the stereotypical problem reaction solution over and over and over. All they have to do is say there's a new variant. It's just a new variant. And this is like the song that never ends. Like it never has to stop. It can just keep going and going and going. And what are we going to do about it?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. That's I call that the Covidian loop, you know, and I sing the old Wheels on the Bus to the Covidian loop goes round and round, round and round, because that's exactly what's happening right now. And I never would have thought that I would live to see the day, because when I think about, before I understood libertarianism to the point that I do now, which is little but enough, I always thought of liberty and freedom as the 60s, right? And the hippies and Woodstock and free love and all that stuff. How in the world did we get to a point where the liberals are demanding that we be tied up like we are right now? I don't know. Maybe I don't understand history, but to me, it just doesn't make any sense. I'm like, what would Woodstock, the people of Woodstock, say to this right now if they were in their 20s and 30s still? You know?
Well, you know, the communists were all about freedom until they got power.
Yeah. See?
And then they locked down and were like, no, you can't do that shit anymore. You know, like it was good when it undermined the state and it undermined our opponents. But now that it's undermining us, we don't want you to do it anymore. Right. So you have to look at it that way. It was never about freedom for some of these people. It was always about power. Right. And so like you got to figure out what these people wanted power over. Like some people honestly want power over their own lives. Some people want power over other people. And you have to engage these people in order to figure out if they're trying to have power over their own lives or power over other people.
That's a great point. That really is. And it's funny because I had totally forgotten about the power thing. If there's one thing that I'm trying to instill in my daughter's mind through all of this and for her future, and as she continues to the public schools, also known as indoctrination camps, I keep telling her, look, if you ever want to know what's going on, whether it's, I don't know, what's going on with your cup of coffee at Starbucks or what's going on at your job and why, so and so got promoted, or what's going on with the government in the country, it's always about power and money. Everything is about power and money. Follow the power and the money, and you'll have the answer, which really isn't that hard to do with COVID. And yet, again, it kind of falls on deaf ears to half the country, right?
Well, it probably falls on deaf ears to your daughter too. And like, this isn't disparaging your daughter in any way. This is just the fact of the matter in human nature,
Sure.
right? Like, your daughter's what, 13 years old?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So she's on the side of power. So she has that power. She's wielding that power. Like, she's
Yeah.
experiencing that power, right? And so she's attracted to that power. It's kind of like Lord of the Rings, right? Like, you're supposed to, you got to throw the ring into the fire, but like, anybody who possesses the ring will not throw it into the fire because of the power that the ring possesses, right?
Right.
She is attaching herself to this propaganda because that's where the power is. That's where the narrative is.
Sure.
And so she feels in some ways by telling you, like, she's kind of alpha, she's trying to alpha you by telling you that you were a Trump supporter. Like, because she's saying you're on the wrong side of history, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what's happening. Like, I don't think she's aware of it. Like, I would never say that, but that is what's happening. It gives her a source of power. My dad is so icky, like,
Right.
type deal.
Right. No, you're right.
And
That's a great point.
And so what your daughter is experiencing is this euphoric nature of power. This is where the term the Karens came from, right? Because it was like the whole thing was like carry on. So it just got
Right.
shortened to Karens. Like, you come and jump in my face and tell me what to do. Carry on. I don't want to hear your shit, right? But the Karens are they're so enthralled and addicted, intoxicated by power that they can't just carry on. They got to get in your face, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I can't argue that at all. And to go back to the money and power thing, and to go back to what you were saying earlier about, you really don't know what the answer is to fix the situation that we're in this country with the way politics and the state are. Really, you've got to fix that power and money thing, right? Because we know what the machine is all about, and that's exactly what it's all about, right? It's about power and money. And, my question really, and it's not really a question to you as much as, but you certainly can expand on it if you'd like, but, how can we do that? Is that really even possible, to be able to get that crap out of it and still provide the security that some people need and the freedom and liberty that other people need? I mean, it's hard to know, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is like an age-old question. Like, I have friends that are syndicalists and mutualists and of all varies and stripes of anarchism. And, I mean, the French thought guillotines would do it. I mean, I don't know. It's like, I'm no smarter than these people. The founders thought the Constitution would do it. It's
right.
I don't know.
Right.
The best advice, I think, out there, Pete and I were talking about it earlier, and that episode will come out before this episode, so people will like kind of know what I'm talking about here. Yeah. It is, you have to create the strong family units of the past. It's a return to tradition. And you have to create these strong family units that existed once upon a time, right? And to where the father is the role model of the son, to where the father is the strong, overbearing protector of the family. And how do you do that? I don't know. I don't know in modern society how that functionally happens, other than people being kind of abstractly attracted to the idea of family in an extended family kind of way. It's the government has, over the last 50 years, 70 years probably, done everything they can to destroy the family and to to make themselves out to be the familial unit. So the best thing you can do is be a strong, loving, good father for your daughter and not argue with her about these things. Is to lead by example and not engage in the arguments, I guess. I don't know that that's the right answer, but that would be kind of my answer, right? Because you don't want to damage these, you don't want to damage relationships that are meaningful. You want to strengthen them. And so, how do you strengthen these relationships? Well, you don't do it by insulting the person's opinions. You do it by showing them their opinions are wrong, right? You lead by example.
Right. Yeah.
My dad told me years ago, I guess I was about 18, 19 years old. I was a young father. And he told me, he said, the number one thing you need to know when it comes to being a father is kids learn that they do as you do, not as you say. And
Yeah.
if you set forth that role and be that role model and lay out that standard, they have no choice but to try to reach it.
I think that's great. I think both what you said here a moment ago and your father's thoughts too are right in line with what I've been looking at. A lot of notes that I've written over the last few weeks since I've known we were going to do this show, and just things that talk points that I brought up during it that fit well. And I have written down here some stuff that I've learned in my own studies as well. And it mentioned quite in line with what you just said is that the thing that we have to do would be to change culture first. And that will change the politics in the long run. So it's right in line with what you talked about with the familial unit. And then also, I think you also said this here just a minute ago, but not in these words, where, that leading with the argument doesn't do the work that you need. And you can't. And so we have to be, the other side. And like you said, whether it be leading by example, being the smartest person in the room, and knowing. And that's kind of what happened with me. Like, that's why I got off of Twitter here, because I bless you. I realized that I was calm. I was like, look, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm never going to change their minds by just arguing with them. So it got to a point where I started to just kind of comment and just go away. I'd comment and go away, and I wouldn't read what they said, or I might read what they said, but I wouldn't. It was never worth responding to, because it was the same old shit, right? So that just was not the right way to try to get things done. And so really and you've kind of already explained it, but one of the things I wrote down that I wanted to ask you was, what can I do? I mean, I'm guessing that I don't need to proclaim myself a libertarian to help try to change the world, right? I mean, what can I do though, as a person that's definitely not left and definitely not completely right, do to try to help change culture? I think probably starts with my daughter, probably in the future, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can only control what you can control. I mean, that's the Stoic mentality, right? Like read meditation, the meditations, right? Like you only have control over what you can control. Like there's nothing you can do about things outside of your control. So I don't. There's not. It's a matter of taking the action on a day in and day out basis in doing the things that you can do to control your immediate environment, and that's all you can do. It's interesting whenever you start digging into this, because when you start looking at the cognitive dissonance as rationality, as the rational point of view, right? Instead of like, well, I'm
Right.
being principled, so therefore I'm being irrational. And you start saying, oh no, they're being rational because of billions of years of evolution, right? That
Right.
that you start to look at it in a way like when you would tag me in things, what would I do? I would mock and ridicule because I
Right.
don't want them to feel at home. I want them to feel like they're outside of the box, right? So like
Yeah.
that's kind of like why trolling works the way it does. That's why people troll on Twitter. It's because
Right.
yeah, they feel like they're rational. So if you have to make them feel unrational or irrational, I guess is the right way to say it, in order for them to start questioning the narrative. If you cannot make them question their own narrative, then you
Right.
cannot change their mind. So the only way to change their mind is to give them that idea that they're being completely irrational and that there's nothing they can say that even sounds remotely rational or makes any sense. And you're never going to do that by arguing facts. People don't react to facts. They react to how they feel. They either feel like they're being rational or they feel like they're not being rational. You have to make them feel like everything they're saying is worthy of mockery.
That's psychology 101 right there, but you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that makes complete sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just mocking these people, like if you got somebody praising Joe Biden, right, and you mock them for
Right.
praising the president, they're going to be like,
Right.
why are you mocking, the savior, basically, like the executive, the head of our country? He represents everything that the country is. And if that's the case, then the country has like a serious case of, Alzheimer's that needs to be taken care of. But, like you have to mock these people because that's all they're worthy of. They're only worthy of mockery. They're not worthy of arguing with. They're not worthy of interacting with on a regular basis. You don't want to be part of their tribe. They don't want to be part of your tribe. So make it clear to them that you will never be part of their tribe and make them want you gone. Make them want you to set up your own tribe and not be interactive with their tribe anymore.
That's good. That's good. And I want to say that I actually feel you talk about the country being, having Alzheimer's disease. I often feel like we're actually, things are so screwed up right now. They've been couldn't fathom that this stuff was going to be happening. And that I would actually be this worked up about it,
Yeah.
every day. But I feel like we're living in a simulator right now that's completely malfunctioning, like with the computer simulator. And it's like, oh shit, somebody spilled the Coke on the computer, and it's like the whole thing is we're just malfunctioning right now. And that they're trying to fix this and they just can't. And then we keep going into the COVIDian loop because, it's still sticky inside the keys. And I mean, I don't know. It's just, that's what I feel like. I laugh and I say that to myself sometimes just to laugh, to laugh about it. Cause sometimes you do have to just, sit back and just
it
go,
makes it a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier if you just laugh at these people.
It's true.
Like, it does. It just makes it so much easier because you're like, y'all want to load me on boxcars and fucking put me in an oven just like Hitler did with the Jews. Like, screw
Right.
you, people. Like, you call me a Nazi all day long. Call me a Nazi. I don't give a shit because you're the ones that are going to be putting me in an oven. You do realize that, right?
Right.
And laugh at
Right.
them. Like, there's nothing you can do but laugh at them because you're not going to change anything. Like I said, you can
Right.
only control the things you can control. So control
Right.
your immediate environment and just laugh at all those people because they're worth nothing but your mockery. They're not worth your time
Right.
or energy.
I agree. And before I forget, I do want to let you know that I did listen to Anatomy of the State about a month and a half ago on the road, and I got out of it basically exactly what you said. I do want to listen to it again because I think that it's definitely it's short enough, and B, it's definitely worth a second and maybe even a third read to just kind of get more from it.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I mean, that's one of Rothbard's best essays ever. It's only about an
Yeah,
hour long, and it's kind of like
yeah,
it was one of the first two essays I ever ran across in audio form. I ran across The Law by Frederick Bastiat, and then I ran across the Anatomy of the State by Rothbard,
okay.
and those two made the biggest difference in my mindset, in the way that I view the state and the way that things operate.
Yeah, that was very helpful, and I'm glad you turned me on to that. And I've definitely heard it mentioned multiple times in other podcasts as well. So if you haven't already mentioned it a million times, I'll give it another thumbs up for your listeners to say if you haven't listened to it or read it, you should, because it's imperative. Even if it's taken me 50 years to read it, I'm glad that I've read it now.
Go to
So,
Mises.org, and you can find Anatomy of the State either in the written form or audio for free. All of Rothbard's writings are at Mises.org for free, so you can read anything that he's written for free at Mises.org. There's a little plug. I don't even get paid for that one, but it's worth it.
That's good. I agree. It is definitely worth it. Definitely worth it.
Well, all right, man. We'll be going over an hour, man. You got any closing comments?
No, I mean, I just wanted to thank you. I'm glad that we continue to find reasons to get together and have conversations like this. You know, I'm a former podcaster myself. I was podcasting back in the day when it wasn't even called podcasting, and
It was called.
who knows? Maybe
it was called terrestrial radio, wasn't it?
Well, I did that. I did that in the 90s. I did do the real terrestrial radio, and then I did a couple of my own radio shows on the internet. My first one was actually in 2005. I'm not even sure that podcasting was a word yet, but we did upload the show and stuff like that, and it was more of a comedy variety thing. But anyway, who knows? Maybe someday I'll join the ranks again. And I'm excited about what you're doing, and I'm happy for you and your success, and I can hope that you continue to drive it forward and continuing to preach the good work. Because I mean, if you don't do it, you know, who else is going to do it? So it's great that you're doing this, Tongue.
Well, thanks, Brad. You've been a great friend, man. I really appreciate you being on my side.
Oh, my pleasure, my friend.
All right, dude. Well, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
Oh, wait. You want to plug something? You want people to find you?
They can, because my books are still available. You know,
there you go. Yeah, and they were good too.
Thank you very much. We talked about my books the first time I was on your.
That's right, we did, because I just finished reading them. Yep.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Yeah, actually, if you just want to go to bradcarl.com, the site is messed up, but I've got it pointing to my Amazon page. So if you just go to bradcarl.com, it should push you over to my Amazon page. You can check out my books there. They're cheap, lots of fiction, and hopefully you enjoy it. So I appreciate the plug.
Yep. Gray areas for sure.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Good time.
Yeah, that was a good one. I couldn't put it down.
That means a lot to me. I know I should write more, but I'm so lazy.
Dude, I can't even finish editing the book that I have done, and I'm like, fuck, man, I got to get this fucking thing released. I started saying that like September of last year. So one of these days, I swear, one of these days.
I understand. I've got one about 2/3 done, and I just, other things obviously have taken precedent at this point. So
right.
You know, it's all good though. We're men of many talents and masters of none.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well,
right.
Yeah. If I spent less time running my fucking mouth, I'd have more time to write.
Right. Exactly. I understand.
All
I understand. Right. Well, look, I'll let you. I really do appreciate you doing this, my friend, and we'll find more reasons to do it in the future.
All right, brother. I appreciate it. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Take care. All right.
If you're gonna play, scam, pick and choose, well, it's a game that was made for you to lose. It doesn't really matter how many times, it's the same old worn out stories, same old lines. They're all pointing dirty fingers in hypocrisy, bragging on their feats of mediocrity again. Never really making any kind of change, but they keep on getting re-elected, and I find that strange. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Yeah, I said fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. What's it gonna take for you to see that we're living in a rigged democracy? People stand in line for the visa they've been choosing, paying no attention to the rights they keep on losing. But they all gather in the rallies and they chant their names, on goddamn well that it's all gonna be the same. Just 4 more years of war and taxes, 4 more years of them grinding down their axes. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Yeah, fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Cause we don't even need them. We'll never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedom. Fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. We'll never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our